Yo, what's happening, YouTube? Afro Cuban here, and I'm back with a brand new video of building my cinematic universe. A video series that I started where I hypothetically put myself in the shoes of someone who's in charge of running a cinematic universe. A DC cinematic universe to be exact. Meaning these are the movies that I will put out and the stories that I would tell that cohesively connects a cinematic universe. So this is how my videos work. Every video that I put out is basically a new movie. And I start off by telling you what phase we're in and the title of that movie. And then I read through the script and dramatically go into full detail of what's happening throughout that movie as I break it down into a 3-act format, in hopes of mentally bringing the audience into my world so that you guys can fully understand the actions and consequences of every character that I introduce and every decision they make in each movie. Now, as you all can probably see from the title, this is another big Superman movie. And I hope you guys aren't getting Superman fatigue because this is the last time we'll see him for a while. But that doesn't mean his storyline will stop, because if you remember from my last video, I specifically stated that the entire second phase will revolve around Superman and Lex. Meaning, even when they're not on screen, their actions send a ripple effect throughout the entire second phase. But okay, without further ado, we are now on the second movie of Phase 2, and this is Death of Superman. And I purposely made it to where we basically seen Superman in 3 movies back to back to back, because I didn't want the audience to feel like I was rushing his death. Because if you count Justice League and then World's Finest and now this movie, and not to mention his solo movie, that's 4 movies that he's been in so far. So his death shouldn't feel rushed at all. His character development is pretty much solidified, and his death will set in motion a chain of events that we will get to as the rest of Phase 2 plays out. But okay, Act 1. Okay, so when this movie first begins, we immediately start off with seeing the origin of Doomsday, as well as a brief scene of Krypton's destruction. So, first off, I would introduce Kryptonians as power hungry, world conquering dictators who travel the galaxy using their advanced technology to overthrow planets. And as for Doomsday, Doomsday is a genetically enhanced mutated creature created by Kryptonians as a last resort weapon for when they needed to take over a planet that will put up any resistance or had resources to fight back. So, in this intro scene, we see Kryptonians going from planet to planet, imposing their will and overthrowing governments, because Kryptonians are searching for information regarding a rumor of a faraway galaxy that has a yellow sun. And there is also a myth that says that a yellow sun will turn them into gods. So, Kryptonian soldiers invade different planets searching for information and resources to confirm this myth. And on several occasions, the Kryptonians will encounter a planet that will be brave enough to fight back. So instead of risking unnecessary war, that's when they will release Doomsday. And Doomsday would level an entire planet in less than a day. But Doomsday cannot be controlled. So once Doomsday will complete his task, he will be put back into sedation and placed back into his cryopod. And so, after years and years go by, Kryptonians finally find out where this hidden galaxy that has a yellow sun is located. But unfortunately, this is the day that Krypton would be destroyed. Some kind of worldwide blackout occurs, stopping Kryptonians from using their technology and their spaceships to escape. And then the planet's core becomes unstable and the planet starts to crack open. And this is when we get introduced to Jor-El. We transition to Jor-El, and he's a scientist working in a lab, and he's frantically pressing a bunch of buttons on his computer as he has a scared look on his face. Jor-El then starts to cry, and then he calls his wife and says, "My love, it's time." And then we see his wife Laura back at their house. She also starts to cry, but then she presses a button and a spaceship rises up from the ground. It's an old spaceship that doesn't run on Krypton's current mainframe, so the blackout doesn't affect it. It still runs on ancient fuel, but it can only seat one person. So Lara puts her baby into the small ship and then she asks Jor-El what to do next. Jor-El tells her to insert the coordinates for sector 1939 and says that that's the galaxy that has a yellow sun. So Lara inserts the coordinates and then the ship blasts off into the sky and flies away. Moments later, Krypton starts to have a bunch of earthquakes and lava starts shooting up from the ground as citizens panic and run for their lives. Jor-El is still on the phone with his wife and he gently says, "I love you." Lara then says, "I love you." And then Krypton explodes. We see a blinding white light as the planet is completely destroyed. But then we see that in the midst of the debris, floating in space amongst the remains, is Doomsday's cryopod. Somehow the pod remained intact, and Doomsday just slowly floats away across the solar system as the screen fades to black. And so now we finally transition to Earth, 30 years later, present day. And we see Clark, he's out having lunch with Lois Lane. Now, they're not officially dating yet, but they do have feelings for each other, but they just haven't made it official. Lois is actually torn because she has developed feelings for Clark, but she also has feelings for Superman, obviously not knowing that they're the same person. So Clark and Lois finish up their lunch, and then Clark drives her home. And after he drops her off, he gets an Amber Alert on his phone saying that there is some kind of an explosion at a nearby power plant. So Clark, being the hero that he is, he quickly suits up and flies away to go help. Lois is in her apartment, and she also gets the same alert. So, being the investigative journalist that she is, she quickly grabs her work equipment and then she tells Perry White to send a helicopter so that she can go and cover the story. And so, a few moments later, we see Superman arrive at the power plant. And the plant is unstable and about to release chemicals into the atmosphere unless it's shut down. And the only way to shut it down is by separating the main power source underground. So Superman starts to spin himself like a drill and burrows his way into the ground to shut down the power. And moments later, Lois finally arrives on a helicopter. And as she's reporting the story, the vibration from Superman burrowing causes a giant cable to break off from the plant, and the cable gets tangled into the propeller and causes the helicopter to spin out of control. And Lois ends up falling from the helicopter just as the helicopter is about to crash into a building. But then, at the very last second, Superman comes out of nowhere and catches Lois and the helicopter. So, as Superman is carrying Lois in one arm and holding the helicopter with his other hand, he asks her if she's okay, and they both just smile and stare in each other's eyes for a few seconds before Superman carries them to safety. And when Superman comes down, all of the citizens and workers run over and cheer for Superman. Children also run over and hug Superman, and Superman hugs them back, as well as smiling and shaking the hands of all of the citizens. It's a heartfelt scene as Superman continues to bond with everyone. And so later that day, we see that Clark finally returns to his apartment. But when he gets there, he sees a strange man standing there in a trench coat. Clark uses his x ray vision and sees that this strange man has an odd molecular system. His heart is on the right side and his skeleton shape looks different. Clark then uses his super hearing to listen to this man's heartbeat, but it doesn't beat at all. Instead, it vibrates, almost as if it's humming. So Clark then says, "What are you?" And that's when this mysterious man starts to shapeshift into a tall green alien. This is our first real introduction to Martian Manhunter. And then he says, "You can call me John Jones. I am from Mars. I have been watching you, Superman. You are very popular with the Earthlings, and the children do not fear you. So I took this shape to somewhat resemble you, to resemble a hero." So this is where we would get an emotional scene where Superman and Martian Manhunter would fly off to have a talk and learn more about each other. Manhunter explains that he is the last of his people, and Superman identifies with him, being a lone survivor of a dead alien race. And the two of them would develop a good friendship. We then get a brief monologue of Superman explaining to Manhunter how beautiful Earth is. and how Earthlings are rash and naive, but have good hearts and are worth saving because he believes everyone is worth a second chance. It's a beautiful, heartfelt scene that's meant to make the audience fall even more in love with Superman. And that's when we get into Act 2. So now we transition to a group of astronauts in outer space who come across some kind of large object floating amongst the stars. The astronauts go and grab it and pull it back aboard the space shuttle to investigate it. It's some kind of large object frozen in ice. The astronauts radio into base and are told to bring the object back to Earth for further investigation. And so, as the shuttle makes its way back down to Earth, the object then begins to thaw out, and we see that it's Doomsday's cryopod. And as it continues to thaw out, we then see Doomsday start to move. And then his fist punches through the ice. Doomsday is now free and awake, and he brutally kills all of the astronauts and wrecks the ship, causing it to crash land back down on Earth. We get a view of the ship burning up as it flies down towards the ground. Now, this isn't Metropolis. This is just some random city, and the citizens stand around taking pictures with their phones because they believe it's just an asteroid. And once it crash lands, it leaves a flaming crater in the ground, and then out from the flames, we see Doomsday slowly walking forward. Now, Doomsday is wearing some kind of bodysuit with Kryptonian symbols going around it, so we can't see his true face yet. And then, as he steps forward from the flames, Doomsday lunges forward and begins slaughtering civilians. So, as Doomsday is brutally ripping people apart, the military eventually intervenes and fires rockets at Doomsday. Now, the rockets don't do any damage, but they partially rip open his bodysuit, revealing his stone gray skin and glowing blood red eyes. Doomsday then rips off the entire upper part of his suit and lets out a ferocious roar. His face and upper body is now completely revealed. Sharp bones protruding from his face, back, and hands as he uses these bone claws on his hands to stab and rip apart soldiers and civilians. It's a gruesome and terrifying scene as Doomsday causes devastation and destruction. Doomsday then picks up a car and throws it at a woman who's trying to carry her baby to safety. And right before the car lands on her, Superman swoops in at the last second and catches the car, saving the woman and her baby. Superman holds the car while telling the woman to run and hide. But then, while Superman is holding the car, Doomsday tackles Superman into a building, causing the building to completely explode and collapse. And so now, in the midst of all of this destruction, Superman and Doomsday trade blows, and each punch is so powerful it causes the entire planet to shake. Now, all of this is taking place only a few days after Superman fought Batman and Amazo. So, Superman is still not 100% recovered yet, but Superman still fights with everything he has left to stop Doomsday from hurting people. But Superman is getting fatigued, and his vision is getting blurry. So, this gives Doomsday the time he needs to land a powerful gut punch that drops Superman to his knees. Superman then begins coughing up blood and passes out. Now, Doomsday is programmed to kill anything that moves or puts up resistance, so he doesn't waste any time or energy on an unconscious Superman. So once Superman passes out, Doomsday continues his rampage on the city. And also, by this time, the yellow sun is starting to fuel and mutate Doomsday even more. His horns and sharp bones grow longer and sharper, and then Doomsday lets out a powerful heat vision blast that shoots out from his eyes and his mouth at the same time. So now, this is when Martian Manhunter finally intervenes. First, he flies in and tries to help get civilians to safety, and then he turns his arms into long tentacles and tries to wrap it around Doomsday to try and subdue him. But Doomsday is too powerful and he easily breaks free. So then, Martian Manhunter fires a beam from his eyes, but it still has no effect on Doomsday. So now, Martian Manhunter is forced to resort to a last resort tactic that even he himself doesn't like to use. He decides to use his telepathy to enter Doomsday's mind and mentally lobotomize him. So Manhunter turns transparent and enters Doomsday's mind. But Manhunter sees that there is nothing on Doomsday's subconscious except rage and destruction. So Manhunter begins to try and shut down Doomsday's brain, and for a quick second, it actually begins to work. Doomsday falls to his knees and lets out an agonizing roar. And then Doomsday tries to fire a heat vision blast at Manhunter, but because he is currently transparent, the blast just phases right through him. But unfortunately, after the blast phases through Manhunter, it hits a parked car directly behind him and causes the car to explode. Now, fire is Martian Manhunter's one weakness, so once the car explodes, it causes him to lose focus and Manhunter becomes corporeal again. And he loses his grip on Doomsday's mind, and that's when Doomsday super speeds over and stabs Martian Manhunter with his sharp bone claw. Doomsday then tosses Manhunter aside and lets out another rageful roar. Doomsday appears to be unstoppable and unkillable. And now we get into Act 3. So now we cut to a military base, stationed not far from where Doomsday is located. And we see Superman is still unconscious, laying on a hospital bed surrounded by soldiers and doctors. The doctors are trying to run tests on Superman to see if he's okay, but their needles and hospital equipment can't pierce his skin. So they just have to wait it out and pray that he eventually wakes up. And so, after some time goes by, Superman slowly opens his eyes and stands up. The soldiers and doctors all start to cheer and applaud. Superman then sees Lois standing in the crowd next to the army general. Now, this general also just so happens to be her father, General Sam Lane. The general then walks over and asks Superman what he can tell him about this creature. Superman says not much, but he knows that it somehow came from his world because he saw Kryptonian symbols on his suit, and the symbols read weapon and doomsday. Superman then says, if this thing is some kind of doomsday weapon, then that means that he is a destroyer of planets, and he will not stop until he destroys our world. Superman then looks at Lois and says, and I'm not sure that I'm even strong enough to stop him. Lois then says, well, why don't you call in help from your League of Super Friends or whatever? And that's when Superman replies that if this creature is Kryptonian, then there's not much that they can do to help. They'd just be putting themselves in harm's way. And so that's when the general reveals some kind of weapon that the government has been working on to kill Superman in case he ever went rogue or turned evil. A nuclear red solar powered missile. So now Superman is angry and feels betrayed that the government would even build something like this without his knowledge, but he doesn't have time to question it. So Superman and the General agree that Superman will take Doomsday to a secluded, uninhabited island and they will launch the nuke there. And so as Superman prepares to head back out for round two, Lois pulls Superman aside and she begs him not to go through with this possible suicide mission. Clark's eyes begin to water up, and then he says, Lois, in case something goes wrong and I don't make it back, there's there's something I want to tell you. Lois then puts her finger over Superman's lips and says, I already know Smallville. I've known for a while. Smallville is a nickname she gave to Clark, so Lois is letting him know that she knew his secret this whole time. And then the two of them share a long, passionate kiss, and then Superman blasts off into the sky and flies away. We then cut back to Doomsday, and we see that Martian Manhunter is bleeding out, but he's still trying to fend off Doomsday with every ounce of energy he has left. Doomsday then stands over Manhunter as he prepares to deliver one last punch, but that's when Superman comes flying in and catches the punch at the last second. Superman then grabs Doomsday and slams him into the ground. And then, with all of his might, with every ounce of strength that he has, Superman punches Doomsday in the face while he's laying on the ground. And the punch is so powerful, it sounds like a bomb went off. And the shockwave alone levels multiple nearby buildings. Superman then yells in agony as he just fractured his own hand. And Doomsday just lays there for a few seconds with his jaw broken. Superman stands there, waiting to see if that was enough to finish Doomsday off. But then, a few seconds later, Doomsday gets back up. So now, Superman has a look of devastation on his face when he sees Doomsday get back up after tanking a full powered punch. And then Doomsday's mutated DNA starts to heal and adapt from Superman's attack. So when Doomsday gets back up, his jaw starts to reattach itself, and then more sharp bones start to grow from under his jaw, making it stronger than before. And then Doomsday lets out a ferocious roar and charges towards Superman. So now Superman tries one more tactic. He does a powerful sonic clap to try and disorientate Doomsday. And Superman is also hoping that Doomsday can't control his super hearing, so that will cause the damage to be 10 times worse. So Superman does the sonic clap, and it actually works. Doomsday stops in his tracks and begins yelling in agony. And then Superman flies right at Doomsday and grabs him and flies away towards the uninhabited island so that the general can fire the nuke. Now, like I stated earlier, Doomsday's DNA causes his body to evolve and adapt to any attack. So, as Superman is carrying Doomsday in the sky, Doomsday's eardrum begins to mutate and seal itself closed to stop the ringing sound. And that's when Doomsday breaks free of Superman's grip, and then Doomsday does his own sonic clap and disorientates Superman while they are in midair. And then they both fall to the ground in the middle of a desert. So now Superman's ears are ringing and his vision is blurry, and he's still trading blows with Doomsday. And at this point, Superman and Doomsday are basically killing each other. They are both throwing their strongest punches. So now the general realizes that they are no longer on American soil, so he orders the missile launch. Lois tries to stop her father, but he doesn't listen. He sees an opportunity to take out the threat, and he doesn't hesitate to act on it. Lois then runs outside and yells at the top of her lungs, Clark! Now, even miles away, in a different country, Superman hears her. Lois then says, Clark, I pray wherever you are that you can hear me. The general has launched a nuke and it's headed right towards you. Clark, if you can hear me, get out of there. Then Lois starts crying and she says, I love you, Clark. Superman then whispers, I love you, Lois. And then he charges back at Doomsday to finish their fight. And so by this point, both Superman and Doomsday are exhausted. And Clark plans on keeping Doomsday distracted and sacrificing himself by letting the nuke hit them both. But then Clark uses his super hearing again, and he hears an Arabian family inside of their house just a few miles away. They'll be caught in the blast radius if the missile makes impact. So Superman must think quick. And Superman does the same ground burrow move that he did at the beginning at the power plant, and he burrows his way into the sand. Doomsday shoots a bunch of heat vision blasts into the sand, trying to land a hit while Superman is underground. But he can't pinpoint where Superman is because he's moving too fast. And then Superman comes up from under the sand just as Doomsday is about to fire another heat vision blast. And then Superman grabs Doomsday by his head and shoves his thumbs into Doomsday's eyes, causing Doomsday's heat vision blast to backfire and explode inside of his own head. But Doomsday had an extra beam that shot out from his mouth, and the beam pierces straight through Superman's torso. So now both Superman and Doomsday fall to the ground, barely able to move, and the missile is closing in. So then Superman musters up every ounce of strength he has, and he picks up Doomsday and flies him straight up into the upper atmosphere, and Superman flies Doomsday straight into the nuke. And so the nuke detonates in the sky, away from any civilians. The sky turns completely red, and we see a bright red mushroom cloud as Superman and Doomsday both fall back down to Earth, leaving giant craters in the ground. Superman used Doomsday as a shield, so Doomsday took the blunt of the blast, and his entire upper body was blown off. Doomsday is finally dead. And then the camera pans over to Superman, and Superman isn't dead, but he's slowly fading. Superman just lays there in the crater, struggling to breathe as he stares up at the sky looking at the sun. And then, after some time goes by, Lois finally arrives in a helicopter and she runs over and checks on Clark as he lays there slowly dying, gasping for air. Lois is crying as she holds Clark in her arms, and Clark doesn't say anything. He just smiles at her and then he reaches and wipes the tears from her cheek. But then his arm falls, lifeless, and his eyes slowly close, and Superman quietly drifts off and dies. It's a heartbreaking and somber moment as Lois continues to hold Clark, and then the screen slowly fades to black. No words, no music, just a black screen and the faint sound of Lois crying.